Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Rotary. It's a pleasure to see you all in your smiling faces this afternoon. You Rotarians are going places. To get us started with our program today is Charlie Robin, our greeter.
It is great to see everyone. Thank you all for joining. I'm excited about today's conversation, and it's always lovely to see everyone's warm, shining faces. Definitely kicks my day off. Thank you.
Rick Pinnell is up next for invocation. Rick.
Well, before I give my invocation, which is also a little bit sobering, but I hope that in something to be cheerful this season, you've all gone to the fairgrounds and seen the beautiful lighting out there. It's a very, very great way to get in the spirit of things this year. So please take advantage of that. You know, at this time of the year, we think of children, especially children that have no prospect of gifts, and that's appropriately so. But I'd like to share with you another group of people who this year especially have many needs, albeit different needs from most of us. Seniors, alone in nursing homes, hospitals, and assisted living residences, and also those who are their caretakers, their aides, their nurses. For those of you not familiar with what's going on in these organizations, and for most of the past 9 months, these seniors have all been isolated. They have not been allowed to have any visitors in their buildings, loved ones, family, or anyone. So it's a very lonely life for those that are voiceless in those situations. So I ask we pray for those. For the seniors, especially those who are isolated from physical contact with any visitors, hold them close to help them through this isolation and loneliness. Pray for their nursing and support staff who are their only link to the outside world. Help us all to take time to show appreciation to their caretakers with some type of gift of appreciation for their dedication to their residents and patients. Go to the facilities and leave cookies, cards, plants, flowers. Just simple acts of appreciation to help them in their difficult days of not only being responsible for their patients' and residents' health and safety, but for their loneliness and isolation. Pay attention this year to your older friends, your aging parents, grandparents. Let them know you care for them and you'll be there for them. Amen. And I'd like to just give something that I think would only come from seniors. Two sayings that I think are pretty great. Life is a gift to you. The way you live your life is your gift to those who come after. And the other one is, it's not what you gather, but what you scatter that tells what kind of life you have lived. Thank you.
Beautiful words. Thank you so very much, Rick. Next on the agenda is Rick Fairbrook to talk to us about this beautiful tradition that we get to participate in this time of the year. Rick. Rick Fairbrook, are you on?
Called unmute, right? Okay, I'm sorry.
There you go.
Sobering words we've heard this morning, and I'd like to bring up maybe a little different sound to your ears. It's a challenging time this year for the Salvation Army for fundraising everywhere in every community. We have fewer retail outlets, fewer people in those stores. We have the opportunity this year for 3 locations to ring the bell and to give people the opportunity to help our community by putting some money in a red kettle. And we are doing great with our 3 locations. We start out with 72 shifts. That's down from 96 last year. But we are at a point where we have only 14 shifts left. So that is fantastic. But one of them is on Monday, and that is the Fred Meyer North location from 5 to 7. So it'd be great to have a volunteer to fill that spot. But right now, what I'm hearing from the Salvation Army, and this probably goes for other organizations as well, but anticipating about a 50% drop in donations. So it's really critical that we do our part, which we've been doing for decades during this time, and sign up for a shift, ring a bell, smile, say thank you. Hopefully you'll get some smiles back and make your season better for you as well. I've got my hat. I have my matching mask now. And I have my bell, so I'm ready to go. Hopefully you'll join us, check the schedule, and sign up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rick. It truly is a wonderful thing to participate in. I always feel like I get so much more out of it with the smiles and the warm wishes from folks passing by than I ever put into it. So indeed, check your calendar and please sign up. Next, we've got Gail Weaver to talk about our Christmas drive-through holiday event. Gail.
Okay, we're getting into that celebratory mood. So your social committee has been hard at work putting together a Rotary holiday celebration this year. It will be Thursday, December 17th, between the hours of 4 and 6. We will be driving past and seeing Santa at David McKinney's house. Thank you, David. We need something from all of you. We need to know if you're coming, because we're ordering cookies for you and we're putting together goodie bags and books for all of the kids that you'll bring in your car. So call the Rotary office. Let us know if you plan to come between 4 and 5 or between 5 and 6, how many kids will be in your car and their ages, so we'll be ready for them and we'll be ready for you. So thank you. Put it on your calendars. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity for the social committee to pivot during these times and do something unique, and we're really looking forward to it. So thank you so very much for that. Next, we've got Jadine Corcoran with our Sergeant at Arms.
Hello, everyone. It's really good to see everyone, or anyone for that matter. Difficult times. I want to just share with you guys, normally Thanksgiving, we have our entire corporate side of the family with us at our home, and it can be up to 60 people. This year, we only had Carl and I. So it was okay. We did share dinner with his dad, Doug, and his wife, but Doug was in the hospital for a week, you guys, so keep him in your thoughts and prayers. But for today, I'm quite excited. You know, our speaker, Rod Nelson, will be talking about 100 years of Yakima climbers on Mount Stewart. And that's what you're seeing here. Thank you, Dwayne, Monick, and Carolyn. That's what you're seeing in front of you. And so I wanted to start this off as Sergeant of Arms by sharing with you part of an article that I came by out of the Yakima magazine written by Sharon Mayer this past year, titled Mountaineering Trailblazers. You'll get the reason I'm sharing this in a moment. But she says, have you ever wondered what it would be like to climb one of the many snow-covered peaks that are spread throughout Washington state? For most people, this would be a scary thought, an impossibility. Now picture climbing those same mountains without the modern technology, tools, and equipment that are available today. It puts it all into a bit of a different perspective, doesn't it? This is exactly what a core group of Yakima and Ellensburg mountaineers did at a time when most of the Cascade Mountains were yet to be explored and when most different climbing routes had never been touched. The climbers and mountaineers of central Washington, who were spread throughout the Ellensburg and Yakima areas, used the painted rocks in Yakima as their training ground. In fact, many of the young climbers who lived in Yakima first went out to the painted rocks with Craig Gilbert. Craig Gilbert and Nelson Bennett, by the way, were instrumental in spurring a post-war interest in mountaineering and skiing. And so they went with Craig Gilbert, their scoutmaster. There he taught them the rock climbing techniques he had learned during his time in the 10th Mountain Division. Lex Maxwell and Marvin Sundquist also played a large role in teaching aspiring climbers at the Painted Rocks, climbers such as Bob Kershaw, Rod Nelson, our speaker today, and Craig Sundquist, all of whom went on to become groundbreaking climbers and mountaineers. So for our questions today, and remember, even though this is COVID, still pay $1 if you don't get these right. And if you want to even put it in the chat box, that's great. So for our first screen, please, Dwayne. What are some of the classic climbing routes at Mount Stewart? A, Stewart Glacier Couloir, B, Gorillas in the Mist, C, Over the Horizon, D, all of the above, or E, just A and B. Go ahead and think about your answers. And the answer, yes, some have that right. And the answer is A and B. I made up Over the Horizon. Wanted to say Over the Rainbow, but I didn't think that would work too well. So for our second screen, if you've never climbed one of our mountains in Washington, that would be me. So I have to pay $1. And the next screen. If you have not climbed Mount Stewart, pay $1. And next, if you have been to the Painted Rocks, and I know many of us have, pay $1. And then finally, what year did a group of Ellensburg climbers form the Sherpa Climbing Club after their first annual climb of Mount Stewart? A, 1926, B, 1949, C, 1955, or D, 1959? I'll give you a moment to think about it. Yes, that's right, 1949. So thank you to everyone. And if you haven't climbed some of our mountains, I think today's going to be inspirational. Thanks so much, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jadine. I always learn something new with every Sergeant at Arms. That's great. Thank you. And now to tell us a little bit more about our speaker is Leanne Antonio. Leanne.
Well, thank you, President Jennifer. Welcome, fellow Rotarians and guests. It's my honor today to introduce my friend, Rod Nelson. Rod was raised and attended school in Selah. He attended college and law school at the University of Washington, graduating in the top 10% of his law class. He has practiced law in Yakima since 1979 and has been a partner at Abeyta Nelson since 1982. He is also a climber and a spoken word poet. He has climbed Choi Oyu, the 6th highest peak in the world, as well as El Capitan and Half Dome in Yosemite. He has climbed peaks in South America, Asia, the former Soviet Union, Africa, and Europe. He has climbed extensively throughout the US for 50 years. You can watch videos of his spoken word poetry on his website, which is kennynelsonpoetry.com. Rod is also a founding partner in High Step Climbing Center. That's Yakima's new rock climbing gym. They cater not only to seasoned climbers, but also to those new to the sport, and especially children. To add a personal note, Rod led me and my husband, Ben, on our first climb up Mount Hood in 1982. And Ben and Rod have gone on to climb many peaks together and refer to each other as partner in a climbing sense. Rod is the brother of Rotarian Renee Goodman and brother-in-law of our new Rotarian Elizabeth Touche. I am pleased that Rod agreed to share on 100 years of Mount Stewart climbing history with our club today. He recorded his presentation, but he is on the call with us and he's going to be ready to take questions following the program.
Thank you, Downtown Rotary, for your hard work, improving our community, and making Yakima a better and better place to live. Projects like Operation Harvest show that you truly do put service above self. The new Yakima YMCA will be a treasure for generations yet to come and will no doubt become a Yakima icon. Again, thank you. It's an honor to be asked to address you today. I'm going to talk to you about Mount Stewart. That's the big jagged peak you see hovering above the Kittitas Valley as you crest the Manastash Ridge for the last time on your drive to Seattle. You get an even closer view of this 9,415-foot granite peak from I-90 around Indian John Hill. Yakima climbers have a special relationship with this mountain. They've done many of the first ascents of its various routes, and the Yakima Cascadians did annual climbs of it beginning in the 1920s. I'm also going to show you a video that Mike Roy and I did of a climb up Mount Stewart's classic North Ridge in the summer of 2019. We made the video as a part of the Yakima Valley Museum project, which will establish a permanent climbing exhibit at the museum, showcasing Yakima climbers, Central Washington climbers, Mount Rainier, and Mount Stewart. The video was sponsored by High Step Climbing Center, Yakima's new rock climbing gym. Mike and I are two of the partners in that enterprise. The rock gym is there not just to allow climbers a place to hone their skills, but also to provide a safe place for children and newcomers to the sport to be introduced to it. But before I talk about Mount Stewart, I'd like to get a little philosophical with you and discuss what draws climbers to mountains. Let's face it, climbing's dangerous, and it's not an easy sport. It takes years to perfect your skills, and it's a lot of hard work. So why do climbers climb mountains? Northwest-based Fred Beckey, who climbed obsessively from his early teens until death finally caught up with him in his mid-90s, was probably the most prolific climber in the world and certainly the most prolific climber on the North American continent. He established countless first ascents in North America, and he went on to write a number of books on climbing, including a definitive 3-volume set of guidebooks to the entire Cascade Range. Fred had this to say about climbing. The views earned by long hours of toil are more wonderful than those gained in comfort. The reward of beauty is associated with toil, as if nature consciously reserves her noblest effects for those who take some trouble to earn them. Our own William O. Douglas, who climbed a few mountains himself, but whose work took him to our nation's capital, returned again and again to our valley, to the Cascades, and to his beloved Goose Prairie on Chinook Pass. He had this to say in his autobiographical book of Men and Mountains. When man ventures into the wilderness, climbs the ridges, and sleeps in the forest, he comes in close communion with his Creator. When man pits himself against the mountain, he taps inner springs of his strength. He comes to know himself. He becomes meek and humble before the Lord that made heaven and earth. For he realizes how small a part of the universe he actually is. How great are the forces that oppose him. I started climbing at age 13 in 1967 with an attempt on Glacier Peak that ended just a short distance from the summit. After that time, climbing became an integral part of my world, and I went on to climb mountains throughout the world. But for some reason, I didn't return to Glacier Peak for nearly 50 years. When I did, I was accompanied by my brother Val and a close friend. It was a very emotional climb for me. Around that time, I wrote a poem about those 50 years of climbing and dedicated to my many climbing mentors, most of whom are now gone, and to my many climbing companions, and frankly, to the 15-year-old boy shown in this photograph. I recited that poem on the summit of Glacier Peak, and with your indulgence, I'd like to share it with you today. I think it will give you some insight into why climbers climb mountains. The name of my poem is A Note from Mallory's Progeny. Barely old enough for pubic hair, we were Peter Pan's lost boys, dancing amongst lonely boulders in forgotten fairy tale mountain meadows, flower strewn and lush green from snowmelt. We stood on top of snow-covered mountains, magically rising above cotton candy clouds, and sent make-believe yodels into the blue void. Our happy thought at night, we were climbers. Then St. Helens, with her beautiful white curves, exploded. The idyll ended and the storm years arrived. We were young wolves loping up mountain slopes, morphing into spider monkeys, swarming up rock and ice faces, standing briefly triumphant on summits, lustfully looking over the sea of peaks, sheiks eyeing their harem, deciding which peak to climb next and which one after that. And if we ran out of daylight, we slept curled in the rocks. We sat terrified on high alpine ledges, the smell of lightning, flashing death daggers, hail piling up like frozen popcorn, strung out on treacherous leads, the abyss staring at us. We uttered primal cries to our mothers. We huddled shivering in deep freeze lockers hacked out of ice. And when the storm ended, when daylight returned, we bottled our fear and climbed on. Icarus, on the very edge of that black hole, flirting with its gravitational pull. And some of us got sucked in, bodies still roped together, lying broken in mountain berg schruns. We performed CPR on climbing companions, their dead limbs bouncing in the talus with each compression, a single stream of dried blood across one cheek. We skipped the funerals and climbed on. It unjumbled our lives, brought us a brief peace. The traumas of war, betrayal, loss, dropped away as cleanly as a stone kicked off a Yosemite ledge. We skirted too close to that black hole ourselves. Immobilized by pulmonary edema, we were dragged down Himalayan peaks. Knocked senseless by rockfall, we were helicoptered to hospital falls, fracturing ankles, shattering shoulders. Hobbled, we climbed on. We became old men with sun-scarred necks, ancient white bark pines weathered and curled leeward by mountain winds. But our bodies are not statues, frozen marble white like Mallory's on Everest. So we limp out the door to climb again, not because it's there, but because we still need unjumbling. We still crave tranquility, because every time we tie that rewoven figure eight, on the other end of the rope, there's a brother whose eyes burn as brightly blue as deep glacier ice. A fellow lost boy, still dancing in fairy tale meadows. One of Yakima's earliest climbers was C.E. Rusk, who at various times was a lawyer, a newspaper man, a businessman, and an author. C.E. Rusk's book, Tales, he was also the first president of the Cascadians. His book, Tales of a Western Mountaineer, contained a number of stories of his climbs of peaks throughout the Northwest. They're grand adventures. He tells of an expedition to Glacier Peak, and in those days it was an expedition, when he and his climbing companion ran low on provisions and had to shoot a mountain goat for food. He tells of a solo ascent of the steep Cooper Spur on Mount Hood, when during the descent he slipped and was barely able to stop himself with his new Swiss ice axe before tumbling down the mountain to his death. And of course, he tells the story of his daring first ascent of the Rusk Glacier, named after him, and the castle route on Mount Adams, when he made that first ascent with a group of Cascadians. I can tell you that my youngest brother, Greg, and I did that route 60 years later. He did it in 1921. We did it in the early 1980s. And even with modern climbing equipment and modern technique, it's no easy route. Rusk also writes of the first ascent of what is now known as the Cascadian Couloir with a group of Cascadians in 1920. A couloir is a French word that means a steep, narrow gully on a mountain slope. Many words in the climbing lexicon are borrowed from the French because mountaineering, at least modern mountaineering, had its birthplace in Chamonix. Russ did this, as I said, with a large group of Cascadians on Labor Day weekend. So the days were sort of short, and it was a large group and a little unwieldy. They got to the summit, but before they got down the mountain, they were overtaken by darkness. There were no headlamps in those days. Russ had what he called an electric light, sort of a precursor to flashlights, but it was unreliable and it quit working right away. So he had to bring his entire party down this mountain, and it's a very narrow, steep couloir with cliff bands all over the place, but he managed to get them down in the dark to safely to Ingalls Creek Valley, where they were able to build a fire and warm up, and they were safe. This route, the Cascadian Couloir, has now become the normal standard route for fledgling climbers on Mount Stewart. It's on the south side of Mount Stewart, which is the one you see from I-90. It takes a tremendous amount of stamina, and it also takes some basic skills with ice axe and crampons, and it takes some basic rock climbing skills. It's also the standard descent route. Two other Yakima climbers, Lex Maxwell and Louis Ulrich, established a little more direct route of Mount Stewart in about 1933, which is now known as Ulrich's Couloir. This is a pretty direct route up the mountain. It's very steep, steeper than the Cascadian Couloir, and it hasn't come into common usage primarily because it's prone to rockfall. It's a little dangerous. I recall descending this route in 1971 when a very large Volkswagen-sized boulder became dislodged and came crashing down the couloir, narrowly missing a number of members of our party in a very narrow section of the couloir. I have not been on that route since then. Lex Maxwell, who would later become the president of Yakima Federal Savings and Loan, did the first ascent of the West Ridge of Mount Stewart in 1935. This has become a classic Northwest intermediate alpine rock climb. It's basically sort of this left skyline as you're looking at Mount Stewart from I-90. This is a great route. It does take intermediate rock climbing skills. There are a number of roped pitches on the climb, so climbers have to be able to protect their partners by belaying them, securing them with a rope as they make their way up the mountain. It comes out onto the south face near the summit, so it's exposed. It's exciting. It does take skills with crampons and ice axe, and it definitely takes some intermediate rock climbing skills. It also takes a lot of stamina because it's a very, very long route. I've done this route probably 10 times over the last 40 years. Beginning, I did it first as a teenager, and the last time I think I did it was just a few years ago. It's a great route, and Lex Maxwell was one of the climbers who set it up. Yakima climber Dave Mayer, father of the Ski Twins, Steve and Phil, did a tremendous amount of climbing in the Northwest, including on the north side of Mount Rainier and the north side of Mount Stewart. The north sides of mountains are typically much steeper than the south sides. They aren't as exposed to the sun, so they don't disintegrate as quickly. They remain steeper, and they're in the shade a lot, so they typically have more ice and snow. Dave established 2 climbs on the north side of Mount Stewart. He teamed up with the Prater brothers from Ellensburg. Bill and Gene Prater were farmers up there. That was their day job, but they were also very good climbers. Dave and Bill and Gene are all gone now, but they did the first ascents of the northeast face of Mount Stewart and the Ice Cliff Glacier. These climbs are potentially dangerous if the mountain isn't in just perfect conditions because they're subject to ice fall, and they take advanced rock climbing skills and advanced ice climbing skills. But the climb that made it into sort of a climber's Bible of some of a wish list of climbs for climbers throughout the world is in a book called 50 Classic Climbs in North America, is the North Ridge of Mount Stewart. And this is the climb that Mike Roy and I did. This book, 50 Classic Climbs in North America, was written by Steve Roper and Alan Steck. They spent a number of years doing most of these climbs and other climbs, eliminating some of them, and talking with a lot of climbers, and basically coming up with 50 of the very best climbs in North America. The book was published in 1979, but 40 years later, a little over 40 years later, these climbs are still coveted by experienced climbers throughout the world. There are a number of climbs in the Northwest that are in the book. The Liberty Ridge on Mount Rainier, Liberty Crack on Liberty Bell, Northeast Buttress of Schlessie, the West Ridge of Forbidden, the Price Glacier on Mount Shuckson. But the North Ridge of Mount Stewart may be the most sought after climb of all the climbs that are in the book in the Northwest. It's a classic climb up straight up the north side of Mount Stewart, and it's a grand climb. The first ascent of the lower North Ridge was by a Yakima climber, a Cascadian, Meade Hargis. He did that in 1970. The Great Gendarme Pitch, and I've done this route, incidentally, a number of times with my good friend Ben Antonio and longtime climbing partner. This picture of us on top of a multi-pitch climb called Birdland in Red Rocks, which is right outside Las Vegas. But the Great Gendarme Pitch on Mount Stewart was first climbed by an Ellensburg climber, Fred Stanley, and a Ephrata climber, Jim Wickwire, of later K2 fame. The Great Gendarme is a portion of the ridge about 2/3, 3/4 of the way up, where the ridge really steepens. The original climb up the North Ridge circumvented this, but the Great Gendarme Pitch was added as a variation by Fred Stanley and Jim Wickwire. And Mike Roy and I chose to go up this. It's become not quite standard fare, but pretty close. The ridge gets very steep. The climbing is much, much harder on the Great Gendarme. There are 2 or 3 pitches of 5.8, 5.9 climbing, and that's what Mike and I did. The climb that Mike and I did and that we recorded, which we're going to show to you here in a few minutes, it takes quite a while. It took us about 2.5 days to do the climb. To get there, you drive up the Teanaway River Road, park the car there. Mike and I actually slept in the back of my car for a few hours, and then got up about 2 o'clock in the morning and hiked up the trail to Ingalls Pass. It's about 4 miles, 2,500 feet elevation gain to Ingalls Pass. And then as it was getting light, we hiked past Ingalls Lake. Some of you may have hiked into Ingalls Lake. It's a beautiful little lake on the south side of Mount Stewart. Then, and at Ingalls Lake is the last place to get water. You have to assess how much water you can get by with. You can't get too much, otherwise the water's too heavy and it'll impede you in the climb. So we filled up with water there. Then you descend slightly, go down, and then come back up over Stewart Pass. Then you descend a steep scree slope, go back up another steep scree slope, and end up at Goat Pass. It takes about 6 or 7 hours just to get there. Then you have to cross the Stewart Glacier, which involves traversing a pretty steep icy glacier you have to do some fairly careful cramponing, ice axe work, because a slip there would be mean a very bad slide down the mountain. Once you get on the climb, I have here, it's about 15 pitches of rock climbing. I'd say it's closer to about 18 pitches. We bivouac twice on the climb. Bivouac is another one of those French words that refers to sort of a makeshift camp, if you will. You don't have a tent. Frequently, you don't even have a sleeping bag. Although Mike and I had a fairly luxurious trip, so we took some very, very light sleeping bags, just enough to kind of keep you warm enough over the night so that you can get up the next morning and climb again. We summited the second day and then came down Russ's old route, the Cascadian Couloir, bivouacking about a third of the way down the mountain. It was dark again, so we had to bivouac again. And then the next morning we got up, hiked down into the Ingalls Creek Valley, where we were able finally to get some water because we were both badly dehydrated by then. And then hiked up over Long's Pass and finally back down the trail to our car. So I'm going to show you that video here in just a little bit, as soon as my assistant can bring it up. And then I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, Rod. It's kind of a flared funkiness. I think what I'm going to have you do is just put me on, and I'm going to go and try and get something in up there. No, somehow we got to get back left. I mean, it looks like it might have cut around that way. Oh man, pressure's on. That was rad.
Well, my goodness, Rod, what an amazing presentation. I know that you're on with us live, which is wonderful because I'm sure that folks do have some questions. So if anybody would like to unmute and ask Rod a question, please do so.
Hey, Rod, my question, I have two questions. How do you go about establishing a route? And then how do you know how to follow these established routes?
Well, establishing a route and following one are two completely different things. You know, typically establishing a route, climbers look at a mountain, try to see its weaknesses. Sometimes it involves, you know, when Rusk did his first ascent of the castle route on Mount Adams, he went up it himself, came back down, then a year or so later, tried a different way. You know, your eye gets better at finding weaknesses and that sort of thing. Following a route's a little different. There are guidebooks which give you a description. Although Mike and I, even on this climb, and I've been up the North Ridge of Mount Stewart, I don't know, 5 or 6 times anyway, and we still got off route. So there's a guidebook with pictures and a written description, but you can still get off route. It's a big place, and it never looks the same to me.
Rod, if I can ask a question, this is Charlie Robin. With the language of mountain climbing being so specifically French-centric, you know, having the modern climbing terminology coming from France, is there a tradition of climbing amongst indigenous people? Is there any reason to assume, lacking modern technology, that the indigenous people from the region would have chosen to climb a mountain? I mean, or like that was something that they did creatively or socially, culturally?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the Northwest, there's some indication that Native Americans climbed, maybe not to the very top of, say, Rainier or Adams, but they certainly climbed mountains. South America, there's a lot of evidence that the natives made it up some of the lesser peaks, yes. So it's been around for a long time. If you've ever been to the desert Southwest and looked at what, you know, some of the remnants of the Anasazis, they got up cliffs mainly for practical purposes. They put granaries up there, and I'm not really sure how they did it. I've scrambled up to some of them, but some of them I did not try to get up to. So yes.
Thank you.
Rod, how many times in your climbing career have you gotten onto a spot like that? My stomach was weak watching some of those videos. How have you ever gotten up to a spot where you've frozen a little bit as a climber and fear of heights took over, anything like that? And how do you work your way around that?
Yeah, the first time that I tried to climb El Capitan in Yosemite, we were kind of, I was with Ben Antonio, Leanne's husband. It was in the early 90s. We were rappelling down. We had decided we got about, I don't know, a third of the way up. We probably should have kept going, but we decided to descend. We started rappelling, and when you rappel off El Cap, you're out on the blank wall. They were established bolted rappel lines, and unfortunately, one of our wrap lines was short. As I got down to almost to the next belay, I was at the very end of my rope with just a few inches between the end of my hand and my rappel device, and if I go off the end of it, I fall 600 or 700 feet straight down, and I couldn't get clipped into the next, and I did freak out. I finally got my wits about me and figured that I could sort of hang upside down and get clipped in. Unbeknownst to me, Ben, my longtime climbing partner, kind of had it under control because he had clipped a device on one end of the rappel line up at the top, and I probably wouldn't have fallen. I think he probably would have kept me, but yeah, I did. I freaked out. But I finally managed, you gotta keep fear at bay. You gotta figure things out. Managed to kind of get upside down, clip into the next belay, and sort of just fell on the belay. But yeah, it happens. It's not a good thing.
Hey, Rod.
Yeah.
Heart-stopping video, and I love the poem, by the way, but how the hell do you get back down?
Well, on this route, we walked down and scrambled down the Cascadian Couloir. So we came down C. Russ' old route in 1920. So it's not that hard. On other climbs, you actually have to descend the route, and you have to rappel. So you set up a belay point. You run a rope through it. It's doubled up. You slide down that rope, set up another belay point, pull the rope, and repeat that over and over and over again. And hope that your rope doesn't get hung up. Hope that you don't pull rock down on it. You prefer to find an easier way down, but sometimes you have to rappel down or down climb.
Hey, Rod.
Yeah.
So there's two of you. So were you? I saw that Ben sort of was leading in that video. So are you picking up all of the equipment as you're coming up? Then is that how that's working? He's linking into the rock face, and then you're picking stuff up as you come up, or do you leave a bunch of equipment on the mountainside as you rappel, or came back down the couloir?
Modern climbers take almost all of their gear with them because they need it as they move up. And my climbing partner on that was Mike Roy. It wasn't.
Okay.
And we swapped leads, although Mike is he's 20 years younger than me and a very good climber. So he did a lot of the leading. He's a lot faster. But yeah, I'm pulling some of those camming devices are like $60 a piece. So you can't leave those all on the mountain. Plus you need them on the next pitch. So that's what you're doing.
Great job with the video. Who was doing the photography? And I thought initially it was a helmet cam, but obviously you're seeing above Mike's head. So how was that working?
They were helmet cams. We used two GoPros. We used a standard GoPro, and then we used something called a Fusion GoPro, which has two lenses, one upwards and one backwards. We did that because it gives you a much better sense of what it's like to be there. We didn't get quite as much footage, Russ, as we wanted. We had some battery issues, which was entirely my fault. I thought I brought plenty of batteries, but they used batteries very quickly. And then we had Keith Effler from Caffrey Studios take all of the raw footage and put this video together. But yeah, no, that's
Excellent.
a camera. It's a head cam.
Okay, excellent.
But I just
thought-
wanted to say thank you for leaving me breathless for about 45 minutes. That was really wonderful. Just a side comment, Lex Maxwell, who you mentioned early on, was president of this Rotary Club in 1963. Just thought I'd toss that in as a little extra benefit.
Yeah, I knew that Lex had Leanne's old job.
That's right.
Or rather, Leanne has Lex's old job.
How much is the weight of the equipment you carry with you?
The equipment has gotten lighter and lighter and lighter over, the time that I've climbed. The rope itself is probably, we have to be very, very careful about how much weight, because you have too much weight, you can't get up but the little lightweight cams, if you were to pick them up, they're probably 3 or 4 ounces a piece, something like that. The rope is probably 6 or 7 pounds. They've gotten a lot lighter. The carabiners are now made out of more of an aluminum type product. They used to be, when I first started climbing, they were, stainless steel, and they weighed, ½ a pound a piece. Now carabiners are about 1 ounce a piece, maybe even a little less. That saves you a lot of weight. It makes climbs like this a lot easier than they were for the guys who did them, 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
Rod, what is your biggest fear that you don't have control of when you're doing mountain climbing?
Well, there are a couple of things you don't have a lot of control over. I have been caught, Ben and I have been caught, in fact, on the North Ridge of Mount Stewart and on the Grand Teton in a lightning storm. And there isn't a lot you can do. There are a few basic things where you try not to go when there might be lightning. But if a lightning storm comes and you're on the side of a mountain, you can't really leave the mountain. You can't get down because you're sort of exposed to the lightning, and just hanging out there isn't the greatest idea either. So you've just got to sit there and hope and pray. That's that. And ice fall is a little more unpredictable. It actually quite a bit more unpredictable than rock fall. Rock fall is more weather related. Ice fall is, it seems kind of arbitrary. It'll take you out or it won't.
Hey, Rod, it's your sister, Renee.
Hi, Renee.
Hi. Tell us about your most memorable climb.
One of my most memorable climbs was, other than climbs with family, taking family.
Thank you.
Ben and I did the northeast buttress of Mount Slessy in 1995. And it just seemed to come together for us. It's a climb we wanted to do for a long time. It's one of the 50 classic climbs. And we had one bivouac partway up it. It was a really cold bivouac. We were both climbing well. It seemed to click.
Thanks.
Rod, you have a bucket list of a climb or two that you want to make sure to check off your list before it's all said and done?
Yeah, all climbers have what they call a tick list, climbs that they want to tick. And one of the things I found tragically is that I thought the tick list would get shorter as I got older. And yeah, there's a lot of climbs I'd like to do. There's a climb in the Bugaboos that I'd like to do. Ben and I were in there in 2000, 2001. There's a climb there I'd like to do. I don't know whether I'm going to be able to do that. I'd like to actually traverse the Stewart Range, climb the West Ridge, Sherpa. Ben and I've done part of that. We haven't done the whole thing. Yeah, there are a bunch of other climbs I'd love to do. Some that I just like to repeat, but yeah.
Well, Rod, on that note, I'm going to move us forward, and thank you so very much for the opportunity to hear about that. I was just on the edge of my seat myself watching that video and trying to keep my heart from racing, but just fascinating to hear about your story. So thank you so much for being our guest today. And in honor of you speaking, we are going to be making a donation in your name to our Yakima Rotary charities. So thank you so very much. Next on the agenda. Next on the agenda to bring us on home with our Rotarians going places is Connie Phelan. Connie.
Hello, everybody. So today, let's see if we can get a picture up. And I'm going to, here we go. All right, there is our new Rotarian, Jane Davis. And she is the administrator for Hyatt Family Facilities and Landmark Care and Rehabilitation. Actually, you all need to know Jane is going places. She was featured in a publication called Provider Long-Term and Post-Acute Care. And she was a part of an innovative training program to help caregivers combat COVID. And many of us Rotarians have been affected in one way or another. Jane was able to share her special perspectives and experience to help COVID-19 Action Network. We are so thankful to have Jane as a Rotarian and a fantastic Rotarian at that during this difficult time. So thank you so much, Jane, for your contribution. We appreciate you so much. Now, the next, you'll see an old newspaper article. And I don't know about all of you, but I'm ready to kick the year 2020 out and bring 2021 in. And so this is going to be a throwback Thursday. March 1962, several Rotarian pilots loaded up their planes with Yak Rotarians, and they flew to Wenatchee to promote an extended invitation to the district conference to be held in April of 1962. So greeting, you'll see in the picture, Mr. Ned Van Amber was greeting his passengers in this picture to take them off to Wenatchee. And so our Rotarians, John DeGrasse, Mr. Applegate, and Jordan Smith were his passengers. And so the district conference was a huge success. And I'm just saying, this is Throwback Thursday, and let's get rid of the year 2020 and go on. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of the week.
Awesome. Thank you, Connie, for sharing that. So coming up on your calendars next week, we've got Sherry Maruza, who's going to be talking to us about life support on I-90 and traveling Snoqualmie. The following week, the 17th, don't forget, it's the holiday drive-through extravaganza at the McKinney home at David and Amanda. So be sure to get signed up for that. And then following that, it's Christmas Eve. So can you believe it? That it is really holiday time. Your shopping days are numbered. So be sure to take advantage of it. Thank you, fellow Rotarians, for another wonderful program. We are officially adjourned.